Hello, what is up?
Good. I'm jamming over here. That was amazing music. I love it.
Kind of fun, right? And it's actually free to use. So I found this on like the YouTube studios. Like, yes, I found some rock and
Yes,
roll.
that's awesome. That's really
And
good music for
you
free.
know what I just realized? I
What?
think I set the schedule to all my posts on social about this stream to 6 p.m. my time rather than 3.
Oh,
It's always something with these streams things, right? But let me
time
just,
is hard, just in
yeah,
general.
time is hard, just like words are hard, right? So give me 1 minute. I'm going to do it.
Absolutely.
So while I do this silly thing, why don't you introduce yourself for a second?
Okay, so I
Thank you.
am Brittney Postma. I'm a developer experience engineer at Netlify. I kind of do way too many things. I am co-host of Svelte Radio, Remotely Interesting, and the CodingCat.dev podcast. I create content with CodingCat.dev and kind of do all the things. I'm a Svelte ambassador, co-founder of the Svelte Sirens. Yeah, just
Wow.
really involved in
That
like
just keeps
really
on
fun
going.
stuff.
I love
And
it.
I have 3 kids, so just add on to it with like life stuff.
Wow.
But it's
um,
crazy.
I I just have to do the tweet and then we're good to go.
Perfect. I did see one come through. I got the retweet out on it, so
Oh, awesome.
maybe some of them are going off. I know all the pings and all the social posts. This is so much like pre-prep and planning. I don't think a lot of people
Exactly.
realize like how much goes into just one little stream. You're like, oh, you
Yeah.
just press go live, but you've got to do all the things.
There's all the things. And then we try to automate it. And I did. And I just get the time wrong. Anyways, so we are back with something we like to call this stream is called Unpack the Stack. And when we always invite someone to kind of just unpack something they've built or that they love, and we can go kind of nitty gritty details, all the things. So, what I want to do today, however, is start with something super interesting before we dive in and unpack some stuff, right?
Awesome.
So, what I actually want to talk about is the Jamstack survey. Because that was so much fun when we saw it on Jamstack Conf, and it was kind of, I won't say polarizing, but data speaks, right? It's really interesting to see.
Data definitely speaks. And that was an awesome conference. I'm sad we didn't get to see you there, but
Oh
I know
yeah.
you were there in spirit. And
Oh yeah.
Alex did a great job of like bringing your talk to it. But yeah, the Jamstack survey was just packed full of lots of results. So I'm excited to talk about them.
Exactly. So let's have a look. I just grabbed a few highlights for us to discuss. So this one is amazing. 55% of developers would rather quit than work in person again,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, this is so true. Like I made an actual decision mid COVID to go to the countryside and work from home. That's just I we wanted that for a while, but this was the moment. How's that for you? Because you work from home as well, right?
I do work from home, and I honestly don't even think I could work at an office. Just like I said, with 3 kids, having to get
Hmm.
them to different things like doctor's appointments, to school events, those kinds of things. I
Yeah,
need a flexible schedule. I would not be able to have a job if I wasn't able to work remotely.
there you go. And it seems to be working out pretty well. Companies are adapting quickly to how that will all work. Like, for example, where I work at Uniform, we started during COVID. So we didn't even have to think about getting an office.
Yeah,
We only did that later where we wanted to have some hubs for people to, if they wanted to get together, they could. And
absolutely.
it makes you people first almost. For me, that feels really good.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
Netlify started with that too. They started with that remote first philosophy, and it was
yeah,
before COVID, but they did start with that as like a foundational point of being remote first. And I think some of these smaller companies in the tech industry are actually going to become influencers for those larger ones like Apple and Twitter and the people that are bringing people back to the office.
yeah,
Hopefully, will see that this is working and start adapting it.
exactly. Do you think it will ever turn back to the way it was, or are we all doing it like this now?
I think this is just a part of our culture at this point,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, we've been doing it for 2.5, 3 years almost now. So it's
yeah.
just, it's, we've adapted.
I think I don't want to go back to an office, but I kind of miss it sometimes. And luckily, next week I'll be in Berlin with my colleagues at our office, and I'm really excited about it. So
That is,
sometimes we do it like a planning week or something.
Yes, and we've had a couple of like all hands, and it's so nice to like get in person and see your team. And there is some of that you do miss in this remote culture. So I think it
Yeah,
is important for companies to recognize that you do need those times and to schedule for those times together. But
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's I think it's for the better. And so this is one that's really good for Netlify, which is 70% of developers are actually using serverless.
I
And
know. And I mean, this is the Jamstack survey. So you're
yeah,
using the Jamstack really if you're doing this survey. But I mean, 70% of developers using serverless technology. And I'm hoping that next year we're going to have 70% using the edge. So it's going to be like,
ooh, yeah.
yeah, I'm so excited for where this technology is going. I think that it's great and really ready for all of this to take off. So
Yeah, and I've seen projects where they like rely on it, like they have SSR related things going through serverless functions to render pages, and it just works because it scales so easily, right? And if you have enough visitors, it doesn't go to sleep.
it
And
scales easily, and I
yeah,
feel like as a more of a front end developer, it enables me to do some of those more full stack things without having to have a dedicated server and maintain it myself and do all the things that I don't know how to do, and just do
yep,
it with my JavaScript knowledge, which is amazing.
it's crazy good because I'm old enough to have done that myself. We had customers with like their servers in the basement kind of thing, where you have to tool everything up and figure out the versions and if they clash or not, all the crazy things. And suddenly I don't even think about it anymore. So very nice. And also what's very interesting is I just built a Nuxt 3 project, and the whole Nuxt Nitro server runs in a serverless function. And in there, it makes static pages or SSR pages or whatever. And
That
so that changed the whole game for me because I can suddenly do SSR when I want, statically rendered when I want, but it actually all runs inside a serverless function that stays awake.
that is
It's
really
so
nice.
different. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
my colleague Salma did a talk. I don't remember. More serverless was the
Yes.
name of the conference, and she had a picture of an old server room, and it was just like wires and boxes everywhere, and
Yeah,
it's
that
crazy.
doesn't,
Like you don't want to
it
deal with that.
exists somewhere, I guess, but we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and
Servers as
this
a
one,
service, as she put.
exactly. This one is huge as well. It's almost 50% of people are actually using Next.js and 71 use React. So
It's
in
just
your
crazy.
opinion, has that grown recently or was it always like that?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I know. I haven't been like keeping track of the Next.js stuff over the last few years. I know that it is big. It's big in the industry, and
Yeah.
it's Gatsby and Next were on this like collision course kind of for a while, and then as soon as SSR and Next.js supported SSG too,
Yeah,
it started like taking off. And at that point,
exactly.
I think that it's just become kind of the de facto React framework. But I am
Well, yeah,
excited for things like Remix coming out that are kind of pushing that a little bit. So
exactly. I'm interested in all these server components and stuff. And for example, I used React when the first version came out, and this is a long time ago. And back then, I only used like DOM related stuff, not really jQuery, but vanilla. And so it was quite a strange approach to me. So I never used it again. And then I actually properly learned it through Next.js because it makes it so simple. You install it, everything is there. You just have to learn the basics without having to tool it up. And so,
yeah, you just have to learn React, which is kind of the barrier to entry for
oh
some
yeah,
people.
clearly, but it's not that hard anymore.
No, it
Like
is
if you're
much
used to
easier.
other things, you have to get, it's a bit of an adjustment, but it's pretty great. And
Yeah.
they have so many smart defaults, like for images and script loading and SSR stuff. So I can
They have
imagine.
so much built in now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm quite interested to see that because we're going to talk about SvelteKit after, how much that has built in or what kind of a different approach they have to things.
Yes.
And now this one is a bit more controversial about how Vue.js was actually mentioned to be in the danger zone of usage, of how often it's used on project. I think that was it. And then Evan Yu had a pretty big Twitter thread on how he commented on that. And so
Yeah.
this is how data is sometimes complicated because in that graph, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone from Netlify is watching, or you, Brittany, you might also know. It's like they were looking at a growth factor, right? Under
Exactly.
if it's under 1, you're decreasing. Like jQuery was at 0.3.
So they
And
were looking from the prior year to this year and to see if it was growing at the same rate of speed or higher than it was the previous year. And based on the people that took the survey, which, as Evan pointed out in the tweet thread, if you go check that out, it's 6,544. Why are like thousands so hard to say? I don't know.
yeah, always.
6,544.
Now try that in French. That's going to be fun.
Took the survey, but the key point of Evan's point is that it's a heavy geo basis. So, I mean, we're largely located in the US and there's some around the world, but I think there is a big view ecosystem in China where we're not able to access some of that data that we want to have. But that's a very good point. And the danger zone is like kind of controversial wording, but it was just to track like year-to-year growth.
Because people can interpret what danger zone means.
Exactly.
When I saw that first, I didn't really dive into these numbers because it's such a good presentation. It was so Laurie did an amazing job. And I look at that, it's like, oh boy, right? And probably everybody did that. But in the end, it's just semantics because Vue was still on 1. They're still growing. They're just not growing as fast as, let's say, React or what they did last year.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
So,
and he also made the point that some of the other frameworks did drop in satisfaction rating and like other things too. So like you don't see, especially not seeing like the year before's data up against it. It's kind of a point that you pull out of context a little bit.
Sometimes it's hard, but it's also interesting to see how the Vue community is reacting to things because Nuxt has been big, right? Nuxt is the meta framework that you can use Vue with, just like Next and React. And Nuxt took a long time to actually release its new stuff. Vue 3 took a while. And so they seem to be coupled together. But then if Nuxt is not stable, well, it is now, but for a long time it wasn't. How often are you going to use the new Vue in a project if the thing you have to use it with is not ready? So it's really hard to judge these things because when Evan created Feed.js, suddenly Vue 3 can be used anywhere because all these bundlers like SvelteKit, but also things like Astro, you can just plug in Vue 3 automatically because Feed will just take care of it. So maybe things will change.
Is like the ecosystem now. It's solid. It's quick. It's
crazy.
SvelteKit, it's Astro.
It's not Turbo Pack though, but maybe that's for a whole different stream.
that is another stream.
Exactly. This one personally for me is very interesting. This is like the CMS space is kind of changing because you saw up like the last few years, WordPress is basically, it used to be like 40% of the internet or something.
I know. Yeah.
All the developers love to use it. And now, for example, Notion came up really high.
This is something that the first time I saw this data, I was like, what is Notion doing in there? They just released their API. It's still like kind of a beta product. And I asked Laurie specifically about this question, and he's like, this is one we have to do a follow-up on. Like we have to go back and say, are you actually using Notion as a CMS, or did you just see I'm using Notion and answer yes to this question?
Yeah, it's like, hey, it has an API. I've queried it once, so it's a CMS. Like, what does that mean? Right?
Exactly. On CodingCat, we are using Notion as a CMS because we do all of our planning for our podcast and things in Notion. So it made sense for us to pull that directly onto the page. But we're moving to GitHub issues, though. Notion CMS is not ready. Our API is
not a CMS. Maybe that's why.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a CMS.
Well, structured data is hard, right? And like, this is a quick thing I'd love to talk about also in the context of Uniform where I work now. That whole space is starting to change a bit because is the CMS the center of the universe, or maybe it shouldn't be? Maybe it should just be part of your universe that's connected elsewhere.
Yes.
And so the fact that the CMS space is in transition, and then other systems like Storyblock with its amazing creative editing, or Contentful and Strapi, they're kind of playing against WordPress. But I'm seeing in a few years that CMSs might be more simple and do all the domain data, all the data that they have to care about, that can go to all your different channels, like your phone and stuff. That stays there, and then there's another place where you create how your page is composed.
I think that
what goes into SvelteKit? Where does that come from? So it's a very interesting place. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, I think that's great for uniform because that allows you to actually compose your page in one place. And the CMS at this point almost feels like a separate thing. And there's so many of them in that space, and not one of them, Sanity is kind of got a little bit of a lead, but there's not one like really pulling away. And so having that data somewhere and then having where you can pull in things like your database and your other layers that you need into your page, like uniform, and being able to compose that together is a great
It
product.
makes the Jamstack feel truly composable. Right? You
Yes.
can choose whatever you want. And I've seen lots of projects where when they're a bit more mature, right? So they use Strapi for one thing and Contentful for another thing because their teams work best in these systems.
Hmm.
And so that's not an issue at all if you have something like uniform, because you just grab some stuff from here and some stuff from there. There's no like glue that coats everything together, which makes it
That's
easier to
so
swap
amazing to
out.
me. It still kind of like breaks my brain a little bit to think of like how you can get your data from all these different places and then uniform just kind of magically fits it
It's
all
not
together.
that magical, but we're using lots of Netlify Edge. But we will
Oh,
come
nice.
out with that soon with some new stuff. It's going to blow your mind. I cannot talk about it though, but soon. I'll show you after a little bit. Anyways, let's continue because we're going to have to. Oh, yeah, this is my last slide. So get away from that. What I
Oh,
want now is, now that we talked all about that stuff, I want to actually unpack something. So
okay.
what we can do is make a little bridge from that survey into what we're talking about, because the survey said that I think SvelteKit and Feet were like the most positively viewed items of all of it, right? Correct me
Yeah,
if
and
I'm wrong.
it's kind of an interesting stat too. I wish we had that slide to look at. I should have prepared that. But Veet and SvelteKit were kind of in the corner, and it was like the framework one, right? And Veet you
Yeah,
don't really think of as a framework, but it's a part of all of these frameworks, and it's really
it
just
kind of is. Yes, I'll just
yeah.
have a look if I can find that slide. But yeah, there's too many options. No,
I know
let's just
there's
chat
there's
about it.
lots of options. It's fine.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, they were up in the far right corner, which was like high satisfaction rating and high growth rate, essentially.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So both SvelteKit and Veet were there. And yeah, today we're going to unpack a little bit about SvelteKit, I guess.
Oh, I'm so excited about that because it uses Vite, but it also has this much more native JavaScript approach to things. It's much more web development rather than app development. And this is my background. And I've built things in SvelteKit just to try it out. And it was so easy with the Suspense API. And it's all template driven, which is basically my ballgame. So I'm excited for you to show me more,
It
right?
is. I think especially for you coming from Vue, which is very similar to how it's template driven and
Yeah.
more like HTML focused, and you can actually just write vanilla HTML in Svelte and it works like that. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and share my screen
Oh, yeah.
and look at
So what did you build here?
so I've just built a SvelteKit app with a few different examples of things that you can do. And so I started with the demo app. If you run npm create svelte in your terminal, it will
Mhm.
create with the CLI, it will generate a tool that you will be able to say, would you like me to walk through any of this, by the way? Like actually in the terminal? Or would you just want
Uh,
me to talk about it?
well, let's chat about it because like
Yeah,
people tend to kind of get these like getting started stuff. What I'm excited about unpacking is once you have that running, let's
exactly.
unpack how it actually works. Like if you're gonna click that plus, I'm sure, right? So it's gonna count.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
that's somehow reactive. Is
So
how
this
close is that to the other things? And what does the kit in SvelteKit do? Is it SSR? Like let's explore these things.
Okay, so yes, so SvelteKit is the meta framework for Svelte, which is a component framework, and Svelte itself is just CSR, just client-side rendered. But if you add SvelteKit on top of it, you open up the possibilities with like static generation, server-side rendering, other hybrid things based on the route that you're on, and you can even use Edge with like Netlify Edge or
Mhm.
other Edge platforms. So
And
using
so
that
that
SvelteKit
these
is a way to
edge
build apps.
So these edge things would actually render Svelte in SSR runtime.
Yes. So
Okay.
if you run like adapter Netlify, so SvelteKit uses adapters to be able to
Yeah.
adapt to the
Yeah,
platform
the
that
Dino
you're
stuff and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're using an adapter, it's specific to the platform that you're running on. So Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare, Node, there's several adapters that you can do,
Yeah.
and then there's a static adapter. And so each adapter is going to adapt the code for Svelte to the platform that you're running on. So in adapter
Nice.
Netlify, when we install that, under the hood, any SSR route is going to render as serverless functions.
Oh, really?
If you
Okay,
set edge to true in your config in SvelteKit, then you will get the edge platform, which is running on Dino for
Yeah,
SSR.
exactly. Yeah.
So it flips that switch from serverless to the edge with that edge config option on
Wow.
adapter Netlify.
It's so easy nowadays. It's crazy.
It is like, yeah. So just, I mean, looking at the code for that too is, let me pull this over here and we'll look in the Svelte config file, and we installed the adapter Netlify, and then you set edge to true down here.
That's it. Done.
That's it. And you're on the edge.
And so it kind of feels like this no config ethos that most of those systems start to use now, right?
Very little configuration for that.
Yeah.
And then also SvelteKit allows you with the edge. We'll get to that in a minute. Let me do this counter component here. So obviously, like you said, I'm going to click this button and it's just super reactive. Like
exactly. And so quickly before you dive into how this works, like how was Svelte actually conceived? Because at the time, because it was done by Rich when he worked at New York Times, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So
but
Rich,
why didn't he use, let's say, Vue? Because that also works in the browser rather similarly. What's the difference?
So let's see. So actually, Rich may not have even been at the New York Times. He might have been at the, he was at another place before that when he actually officially started on Svelte. But Svelte didn't really take off until it hit Svelte 3. And that was when he was working at the New York Times. And they were using it to build those high-powered graphics that they needed for like the COVID
like the elections and stuff, right?
The elections, the Olympics, those kinds of things. He was needing it to build really fast reactive models. And I don't know enough about Vue really to answer your question about how they do that differently. Do you know like how Vue reacts in the DOM?
At that time, like the difference between Vue 2 and Vue 3 is that in Vue 3 they're using proxies, which I imagine Svelte also uses, and that makes it extremely fast. And before that, it was some sort of shadow DOM, fake DOM kind of memory management kind of thing with a tree. When something changes, let's not re-render everything, but only a little part, and then put it back as a fragment, like the complex stuff that React was also doing.
Exactly. So virtual DOM is something that is popularized by React, and I know Vue used it for a while. I don't think, like you said, Vue 3 does not use that now.
Well, maybe part of it. I don't know enough, but it's the reactivity that they have now is extremely fast, and I imagine Svelte is the same.
Yeah, so Svelte does not use a virtual DOM at all. It compiles your code. So that is the biggest difference between Vue, React, and Svelte, is that Svelte is a compiler. So it requires a build step, but that compiler compiles down to really efficient vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you're actually updating the specific DOM nodes rather than diffing between two different virtual DOM and the real DOM.
Okay, so it literally just compiles down to a little inline script that you put down, and that's what it does. So that's ridiculously fast because it does less on runtime, basically.
Less on runtime, and it allows you to provide more out of the box so that you can have things like animations included, because if you don't use them, they just compile away. We also have accessibility warnings. What's the other thing I was going to say? CSS. If it has scope CSS by default, and then if you don't use a CSS class, it gets purged automatically because it knows that you're not.
That is cool. Yeah, because it's literally parsing the thing. So if it's not used, why put it in, right?
Exactly. Cool. Yeah.
So they're not really like single page app kind of things. It's more like in place, agnostic, it does a thing. Does that make sense?
Not in place, agnostic.
Well, what I mean by it's kind of like you can drop a Svelte component that becomes agnostic of the rest of the application. It's just a thing you put there. And
it is. And Svelte can actually compile to things like web components. So you can use it in other frameworks by using the compiler itself.
I'm
Mitosis.
excited by that. That's
Have you
cool.
heard of Mitosis from Builder?
I've heard of it. I've never used it.
I haven't used it either, but it was built on a JSX language, so you could write
Look at
JSX and then
this.
compile out to other ones. But then someone built a hi Stefan.
Hey, Stefan. Sorry to interrupt. Let's go.
No.
Back.
No worries. So someone from the community built a Sveltosis version of it. So you can actually write Svelte and then go to other things. And so that is now actually implemented inside of Mitosis itself. So you can either write JSX or Svelte and compile out to any other language, which I think
that
is really cool.
Very interesting.
That's a way to start using Svelte, even if you don't.
If you're in another land somewhere, you can still use it because it's so agnostic.
So one of the things with this counter component that we notice first off is we don't have any use state. There's no use effects. We just declare a variable. So let count equal to 0. And then we have these little reactive statements. So the $, I think Rich is obsessed with the $, by the way. So we use it as an
Maybe
alias.
because dollars pay for the rent.
I think it's actually because there's a $sign in JavaScript that they hijack. So it's a native JavaScript element that's rarely used, and then they're able to hijack it for their needs. So,
okay, just like jQuery used to do, remember?
Yes, so
exactly.
it feels a little bit like that, but the $: makes a statement reactive. So you can depend on another thing like count here, and each time count updates, it's going to rerun this statement.
So this almost feels like in React, like a set state for that count, but then easy. Basically,
I'm trying to this is what comes with the demo app. So so you don't even really need, we could put just count down here.
Yeah, and it will probably just show you a number, right?
And we would just show the number, but if you update it, this actually makes it rerun that so that it gets updated.
So this is a reactive property that let count becomes reactive because of that $.
No, so this is actually just the variable is reactive by nature. This reactive statement means that because it's dependent on count, each time count updates, that this display count.set is going to rerun.
Okay.
And this .set is on this store. So this
and I think that .set might even come from a proxy. I'm thinking that might be that. Where in Vue.js, they actually abstracted that away.
The only reason that you need this reactive statement is because of the spring animation.
Okay. I'm saying stupid things. That set comes from the spring option.
Yes. So this spring option is a store, which is denoted by this $sign here is how I can tell that it's a store. And this is subscribing to that store. And then this .set is a method that comes from the store. And so every time count changes, it's updating, rerunning the store to do the spring animation. So we can see there's a slight bounce to the number.
Yeah. And so how is that animation done? It's just some CSS, I imagine.
Well, it comes from Svelte out of the box. You can look at it and they're all built on CSS animations.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
That just gave you an index. Oh, here we go.
No, this is the types too. Let's see if we can see.
I imagine this is some sort of CSS thing.
I don't even know where to look at it at. I'm using Tailwind, so I've got 1,000 classes in here.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's the drawback.
I don't know where it's at, but I do know that
worries.
All of the CSS animations out of the box use CSS transitions under the hood. And you can actually take the CSS animations and edit them to your needs. So you can get a function and take the time and then loop over the animation and change it to your needs. So you can mix and match animations, you can edit them, you can do whatever you want with them.
And so that means that Svelte or SvelteKit, I don't know, one of the two here has some sort of opinion and just added some animations for you.
It has given you access to those out of the box. And those are, so the spring is one type of the animation, the easing libraries. There's animations out of the box, and then there's transitions out of the box. So you get a few different ways, like fade in, slide in, those kinds of things just come out of the box for you.
That's very nice because things like Vue or React don't do that. So this is like a
Yeah,
little extra for developers in a front end setting that makes it super easy.
it is. And this is just Svelte. You said Svelte or SvelteKit. So this is just the Svelte part. This
Okay.
is the
Okay.
compiler itself that is doing that. So we haven't even gotten to the SvelteKit part yet.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. We've got one of the things that SvelteKit provides for you out of the box is this routing system. So I'm going to make this just a little smaller and pull this sidebar out here. We can look, we've got this SRC directory is
Yeah.
very popular in the web development space. This is your source folder where everything lives. We've got a lib folder, which is where any of your library code lives, components, images, anything like that that you want to put in your library. One of the other things that SvelteKit provides for you is a package command. So if you want to create an NPM package, put everything in that lib folder and run SvelteKit package, and it will package all of it up, do the types for you, and you can publish to NPM.
Oh boy,
Very easily.
there's so many extra little things in there that right now, if I would wanted to build an NPM package, I have to think hard to figure that out.
And this makes it much easier to like create packages. So people talk a lot about the Svelte ecosystem being really small. A lot of that is like, we don't need a lot of extra libraries because it's so close to vanilla JavaScript that we can really just write Svelte and JavaScript and use that for ourselves. But there are lots of little packages created through this method that I'm just talking about.
Very cool.
Letting you do other things with Svelte and adding those packages. And then the other thing that we get with SvelteKit is a router. So it's going to provide you that client-side routing, the navigation that you get based on routes. And this was just recently, maybe 2 months ago, updated. You probably heard a lot of noise about how SvelteKit had this big migration.
Yeah, exactly. Because I used it before, and then I looked at my stuff, and it's like, oh, it's really quite different from what I see now. And that would be this update, I think.
It is. So a lot of the content you see out there is going to be probably on this older layout system where our older route space system where it was a file-based router and you had index.svelte files. We had double underscores for private files that were not routes. And they did away with all of it. They said this was from Sapper, which was the meta framework before SvelteKit.
Okay.
And we made some misjudgments in the way that we were building, and we wanted to go forward before 1.0 with SvelteKit and actually make some API changes that we think are going to make it a better framework.
Okay.
And so they ripped the Band-Aid off, and they're like, but they did provide a migration command. So there's like a really simple migration command that you can run that tries to rename all of your routes for you, and then you have to go through and edit some of the data. So what that does in the routes folder now is that it's directory based. So in the root of your routes folder, you will see these plus prefixes in front of things. Those mean that they are a route. They actually get caught by the router and created as a path on your web page.
Okay, so what does that do with layout then, for example?
So the layout will go to every single route. So all of these directories, this layout hits every single one of them.
It just wraps around with this slot kind of approach. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. So we have a slot here, and that is where any children of this file goes. So this plus page.svelte file and any plus page.svelte file in any directory is going to be inside of this slot because it's in the layout.
Cool. Makes sense.
You can escape from a parent layout, but that gets more into like the advanced layouts. And that is a little complicated even for me. You have to use like an @ symbol and group layouts, and it's a little a little strange. There's like a parenthesis.
This pretty nicely, but that takes some time.
I really like the way that Remix does nested layouts, and I kind of miss it a little bit, to be honest, because I mean this is a little difficult to look at. If I open some of these up, you can see how many plus page.sveltes I have here, and it's
that's a little challenging
where you're at. But if you open another one thing that you can do in VS Code is see, I opened the wrong one. I have this little thing that says what folder it's in.
Exactly. I use that all the time.
So that's a setting in VS Code that you can set. So it tells you what directory it's actually coming from. So you don't have just a bunch of plus page.svelte files. So anyways, back to this layout file. So this layout file wraps the entire application. I have my header imported as a component, and that header is just right in the same directory. I'm using it one time So I'm able to put it in the routes directory, but because it doesn't have that plus page prefix on it, it doesn't get caught by the router. So this
makes
header
sense.
just gets escaped by the router and gets used inside of the layout file. And then we import or use the header component. We wrap the main around the slot, and that means any of these children. And then I just had the small footer that comes with the demo application.
And so why didn't you put that header and the nav and stuff? Why didn't you put those in like your lib folder where your components live?
Because I was only using them one time.
Aha.
So
Okay, cool.
That is a personal preference, but I think this is kind of the reason that they did this change in SvelteKit, is so that if you're only using a component one time, you can put it right by the route that is using it, and
Makes
there's no
sense,
need
right?
to like extract it out. So the code is still extracted, making the file more readable, but it's co-located to the route that it goes with.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So, and then the plus page.svelte file is going to be your home route of the application inside of that slot that we saw in the layout. And the plus page.svelte indicates the UI layer. So that is going to be anything that you see on the page. This is your Svelte code where you would put any JavaScript, HTML markup, and styles for that home route, which is the route that we see the counter on here.
Exactly. And what if, now the hard questions come, but you probably have answers. Let's say I want to do something SSR or AJAX call or whatever here. I want to get some data from a CMS in my page.svelte, my first home page.
So you can do that only on your first home page. You would do that in an endpoint file, which are these plus page. And there's several ways that you can do this. There's plus page.ts, which is going to be a TypeScript file. These run on the server and then hydrate to the client. So they're going to run on both. There is a .server syntax that you can see right here.
Yeah, I saw that before. Yeah, okay.
Plus page.server.ts, this only runs on the server. So this does not hydrate to the client. So if you only wanted something to be on the server, you would add that .server extension to it, and then it would only run it on the server. There's also a just .server syntax, so you wouldn't do this plus page, and that gets ignored by the router, but also runs as an endpoint on the server.
That's cool, because that way, because what we see all the time is, let's say you get rich text from a CMS. Generally, in the API result of a rich text of a CMS, it's just JSON that you have to convert into an HTML string. You don't want to do that on the client, because that means you're giving that whole bundle, that whole parser to the client, which kind of sucks.
Exactly.
There's no need.
So you want
so that you would do on the server.
Manipulate your data on the server.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you can do that in this. I'll show you a more complicated one in just a second here, but this is just a way to actually pre-render this route. So I'm rendering this on Netlify Edge. I showed you earlier how we had the config for Edge, but because I put in this endpoint file, export const pre-render equals true, it is going to pre-render this route. So this is going to be statically generated at build time, and it doesn't have any dynamic content that needs to change. So only this part right here has JavaScript.
Well, that's just hydration, right? So that's fine.
So, but the page itself is pre-rendered. There's also a way to do the client-side rendering. You can turn that only on in dev mode. So then you would actually have no JavaScript on the page, which is what we're going to see in the about.
And so is it possible to output anything in SvelteKit that has 0 JavaScript files?
Yes. So the about route, if we go to, what do we want to see? View page source.
So there are no scripts here.
There's no script. I can do a search script. This is me. I did this to set the theme. So I have a dark
of course, you're looking at if I'm dark theme or not. Yeah.
This is in my head component, but there's no Svelte code in this at all because I have this, I pulled the wrong thing over. This line right here sets client-side rendering only to dev mode so that we have it in our hot module reloading. But when it goes live, you do not have that client-side render. So there's no script tag from Svelte. And I can show you, I added this to my template file. We have this app.html that injects all of your...
Oh, very cool. So we used to have this in Webpack. You had this index file where it would inject back in the day.
So any of your meta tags, your links, any of your
so you can just
images, all of those
them in here easy.
In here. So I'm preloading my fonts and I am setting my thing by default, so I don't have that flash of unstyled content.
Yeah,
I won't say
exactly.
the acronym for you because it
Local
sounds
storage. It's nice.
the FOUC sounds really bad if you do that. But other than my script tag that I added, there's no other script tag on this about page because it is only client-side rendered, and we're looking at the live version of this on Netlify.
Nice. And so what happens when you scale this to 1,000 pages? Lots of routes. Are you going to go into all of them and say, this is SSR, this is not? Or can you also centrally do that somewhere?
You can set, so you can do it by the entire application if you wanted. So if you just wanted a static site, you would use adapter static and just render a static site.
Oh, of course.
If you want this hybrid routing, though, it really has to be done on a route or a layout basis. So you could create a group layout, like I was mentioning with the advanced layout, and then do a layout.ts file. And that would allow you to set for those, I think, that you can do it in a layout file. And that would set for those layouts to be server side or static. So I guess there are some ways to do it at scale that you'd be able to group them together.
Well, it's really interesting. I'm asking this because you can start to see the differences in approach between these. Like because I'm so close to, let's say, the Nuxt community. They also had these similar approaches to things, and they solved it in a different way. Because when you work with Nuxt, it's almost like you're basically having a living application, which means there's some configuration on a central place, and that's where that happens. That also means there's more black magic. It's not bad, it's just different. And here, when you look at this thing, it almost feels like it's more just web development. So you choose where you do what yourself much more. I love that index file where you just whack in some stuff and it just works. Where in Nuxt, you can kind of do it, but you might want to plug in or you have to write some wrapper around something, and here it's just very interesting.
Yeah, and when you said that, it feels like web development. This is one of the core principles of SvelteKit, is that they are built off of web APIs, so that actually by building Svelte applications, you're going to become a better vanilla web developer too, and you're going to be able to use like those MDN docs alongside the SvelteKit docs to build your applications. They provide things like fetch in those endpoint files so that you have fetch in any environment that you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in Node or Dino or on the client, you have access to a fetch API just like the web.
So they polyfill some stuff that might feel different.
Exactly. That's what those adapters do, is they do the polyfills that are needed for whatever platform that you are running on. And things like cookies and headers and all of those things have access in those endpoint files. I think you can actually see some of them in our next route here. If we go back and look at the Svelte app, this is another thing that you get out of the box with the demo application, is that it's a Wordle clone built in Svelte. And you can see that, I mean, it will work if this is one of my favorite words to use for this, because it's got like some of the most used letters in it, even though I don't know what the word means.
It sounds Irish or something.
Yeah. And I'm not going to sit here and play this because I would probably lose, but I would love to win, because this actually, so at Svelte Summit, which was back in September, we had a talk on Svelte Confetti, which Peru VJ, who did the Mac OS clone, did you see the big Mac OS? It was done in Next.js and then he migrated it to Svelte.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've missed a few of those. Oh, that's so cool.
So he did that. Mac OS actually got him his job at StackBlitz. And then after he did that, he built this Svelte Confetti package, and it was 2 kilobytes of JavaScript, I think is all that it takes for this Confetti package. And so Rich loved it, the talk, so much. By the time he announced this the next day, this Svelte clone, he had implemented it back into the demo application. So he from day one's talk about Svelte Confetti, and then the next day it was like implemented into his talk, which I thought was.
But that means you can do amazing things with state and remember what stuff is happening and changing it up. Because Wordle is not a particularly easy thing to implement, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, there are lots of things at play there. So you have to like look at, so the page.svelte has a few things in it. This is the confetti package that I was just talking about that Peru built, and this was implemented in that one day. So we went back and added it. So when you win the game, that goes off. This enhance is something that comes so you can progressively enhance your forms.
Nice.
So any form in Svelte, is just a regular form, if I can find it, form component or element,
Mhm.
HTML element, and it's got a method of post, and then we have this action here. And this action looks a little funny for an action because an action usually goes to like an endpoint, right? Or
Exactly.
goes on
Yeah.
to another URL. So
Mhm.
this question mark allows it to be progressively enhanced by this enter method. And the enter
Okay.
method you can find over in the server side code that's only going to run on the server. And we have this actions object that you can create. And so you can create different actions that you can run in your form based on which method you're running. So the enter method is the one right here. That's what happens when the form gets posted.
Yeah.
And this is like checking for your guess and seeing like what is going on through. So each time we're hitting enter on that form, it's running that method. We also have an update one that's going to be checking every time that you click a key. So it's updating the form. And then we have a restart.
Why am I not using this yet? Like when I look at this, I'm like I'm old school, right? I used to do vanilla JS with all those things, and we would like build this type of stuff. But this is now SvelteKit kind of just combines all these things. The other day, I had to make something with a relatively complicated state and forms with Next.js and React. The amount of set state and use effects and all the things I had to do, and then I couldn't get it done almost. This is basically just old school like MVC, and it just works. It's very
This is just very like web standards based. You create an actions object that's got several methods on it that you can run, and in your page.svelte file, you run those where you need them. So the action on the form is the enter. Let's find update somewhere in here. There's restart on this button.
Oh, there you go. So it's and this is actually a button. When you click on it, it does a form action, and so it knows about that somewhere.
Yeah, so we can see the button. Where's the reset button? There should be a reset.
I don't know. I don't know.
I did some styling to this. I wonder if I accidentally hit it.
No, it's fine. I get the gist. So I do have a question because I'm looking at this stuff. Okay, so this also has a play action, like the form action is just a restart. And so is that form action native to Svelte? Or SvelteKit probably? Or did you bind that somehow?
This is native to SvelteKit. So this form action comes with
it comes from that forms
it's not
packages,
imported
right?
or anything. It's just I actually assume that it's probably like a data attribute under the hood because it's a compiler, so it's going to compile
likely it makes it a data attribute with just a click.
Yeah, so that form action just comes from Svelte that you can put onto things. And what was our other method was
because that makes it so easy to use.
And there's our update on another button.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just put that form action on there and then you set it to the method that you want and it will run that when those are clicked.
So I have one last question because this is a bit self-serving, but like at Uniform, we have this lovely SDK that basically just looks at your uniform composition where you have a whole bunch of components defined. And those are just JSON objects, basically. It's like the hero component is JSON type hero with a whole bunch of properties that you get from external sources. So let's say they're already filled. So basically what you have when you query one of these compositions, you have a list of components, and then you have one master slot in which they all sit, and then you have a component that might also have a slot with two components in it, and all their props are filled. Can I now query a composition and then dynamically render the components in SvelteKit or in Svelte? Because what I would love to do is look at
slots.
For example, or maybe let's like take slots out of the equation for a second. Let's say I see component, and then inside an object, and it says type is hero, and then title is blah blah blah. Can I now actually look at, okay, this is type hero. When I see the type hero, let me just dynamically render a component that I have somewhere that is called hero in Svelte. Because if you can dynamically render components like you can do with Vue and React and stuff, I can make an SDK for Uniform like very fast, and I would be very excited about that.
Let me show you my blog route.
Yeah, because what could be quite interesting is if you have like just something you call component, and then exactly this. Okay, perfect.
Yep. So I am pulling data from a post directory. So I've got 2 posts, a
Also
markdown
markdown
and
stuff. Yeah.
an SVX, which is a MDX alternative. It's called MDSVEX, SVEX. And
course.
this is our MDX alternative for Svelte. And so that
Yeah.
allows you to actually use components in your markdown files. So in that, what file was I in? The page.svelte file. You can pull that data through in the TypeScript file. I have a get post. I'm doing it in the parent. A get post function that runs and finds the post that I need for each page. And then it's returning that component data back to this, and I'm getting it from that parent. That's what this was doing. So it's pulling that parent from the layout route and then returning this metadata and this component. And then the component I set equal to this on the Svelte component.
And can you give separate props also to that Svelte component?
I'm sorry?
Let's say you have like for that component itself, it might have title and maybe some Boolean values or whatever. How do you send these props to it?
You get them wherever you need them. So in this one, I'm getting all of this data from this layout TypeScript file. So here I'm running this function that's actually finding these. But if you needed more data, you would just do it in these endpoint files and send it back. So I'm returning.
And so how is it sent back exactly? So right now you do posts and post. And then where you load that, like this component, what does that component thing have? What is in there?
So
all the data is in there as well.
Actually, the root route of the blog is just a redirect. I don't even have a .svelte file in that at all. So I have a pluspage.server that throws a redirect.
Oh yeah, nice.
To my first blog post. I don't even have a blog route. I just wanted to avoid that for this. I didn't want to just list out two pages. There was no need, so I'm redirecting. But this layout is returning all of this data to every single route in this directory. So this blog directory, this slug is a dynamic route. And then
so we still have like the brackets and stuff. Yeah, okay, cool.
You still have to have the bracket on the directory name. So it's a little different than it used to be with the slug on the file name.
Well, this follows how the other meta frameworks do it nowadays, so that makes sense.
The parent is something that SvelteKit provides, and I'm pulling that data from the layout, and I'm awaiting that data, and then I'm returning the data that I just need for this component. So I actually have up here in the layout, I'm not using this post right here at all right now.
Okay, because you just do it on the server end of things.
Yeah, and so I returned it, but I didn't do anything with it, so I didn't use it. So I'm using the post data here and then returning that to the front end so that I can show the post, which here.
And then it's, exactly. I love this because what makes this easier is the fact that you have this server.ts files or just the TS files. So the parser or whatever renders your website knows exactly where to look. Because when you do this, let's say in Vue, when you have a .vue file, or in Astro with an Astro file, there's one part that has to work on SSR and not SSR, and there's parts client all in one file. It makes it a little bit more complicated. This is just saying, you know immediately what you're doing when you look at this graph of code, right?
That was one of the reasons for that change, is that so you can actually look at the file and know explicitly what that file is doing, where it's running, and how it's working. They had the load component before that was actually running inside of the UI file, and now that runs in that endpoint file. So you know that if it's not a .server file, that it's going to hydrate to the client.
And so with this in mind, if I wanted to make, let's say, an RSS feed or maybe a sitemap XML file, it's literally just one of these server routes that outputs something, and then you just make that XML or something. And it's that simple.
Yeah. It is.
Very nice.
I wanted to show the edge route real quick before we go.
Yeah, so please do. Yes.
It's where I am located at, Holland in the United States, and Holland, Michigan. I thought I had the country code in there, but I must have done something weird to that. And then this is a localized timestamp. So wherever you are in the world, if you go to SvelteKit-examples.netlify.app/edge, you should see your local time, and I will show you that code, how that is running.
I'm just typing that in right now.
Okay.
What was the URL again?
SvelteKit-examples. .netlify
Yeah.
.app/edge.
Let me see what I see here. So for me, it says, oh, that's very interesting. It shows me Holland, France. Huh?
Oh, it's my. I wonder if
Did you by any chance hard code that name?
Oh, I did it as my default, my back.
Okay, so
I wonder if something's going with my.
No, I have an explanation for this. I'm running on a 4G box.
So
And 4G is all over the place around here, so it doesn't give the city.
This is based on whatever your ISP provides. So if your ISP doesn't provide, and this is my default, so it's going to default back. I should probably do it as something other than my city.
Maybe nowhere.
Nowhere. We'll change that in the next iteration of it. But it's based on your ISP and what they release. So if you don't have a city, that's why it's saying Holland for you, is because I do have that.
No, that makes sense. But
is your time correct?
This thing, which is, oh wait, let me check the time. Yeah, exactly. Edge. Yeah, the time is correct.
Okay, nice. Perfect. So it's localized timestamps for wherever you are in the world. And this is running on Netlify Edge, which is Deno code. But SvelteKit provides that Deno code through the event.platform object. So you can run event.platform and get access to the Deno context right in your JavaScript or TypeScript file. So I don't have to type any Deno in here to actually get all of this data back. And you get access to all of your geolocation, your time. We added the time zone to it now, so you don't even need any external APIs to get your time zone.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Very cool.
Cookies, like ways to personalize. And I know we've talked about personalization a lot on there.
Exactly.
I have a lot more fun.
Cats.
So I'm just fetching from the Cats as a Service API.
Nice. So this is just in your server. So is this SSR or is this client?
This is SSR. Oh no, I wonder if I can SSR that. Let's see.
Likely. So the only thing you'd have to do is just add .server, right?
Yep, .server, and then I will need to make sure I'm running this locally because I don't have this. This is the live version.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And then Cats. It works on the server, so I just needed to rename it.
Isn't that insane? I love this.
So it will allow me that fetch object just straight off of the parameters. And it provides that and adapts to the Deno platform that I'm running on Netlify.
Oh, exactly. And so if you're running this locally with Netlify, so you probably just did Netlify dev or something. Is that also running like Deno in some side of wrapper? Or how does that work? Because it does some sort of edge locally, right?
Yeah, so that's how you test locally, is running Netlify dev with the CLI, and it runs the platform. I don't know how any of that works under the hood.
Oh, it might be some virtualized awesomeness locally with
the SvelteKit adapter is what actually like adapts that code. So I wonder if it's the Netlify adapter from SvelteKit that actually adapts the Deno stuff back to, because those polyfills and things that it does. So,
we don't need to know all the black magic.
Yeah, I know it's black magic, but I didn't even show my, I have themes built into this. Oh, and this is a really cool package. So this doesn't come out of the box. Why is that not working? With a Svelte, but this is a 3D package that you can install called Svelte. And
this is like 3JS style.
It is a Svelte library built on 3JS.
Wow.
Is this not so freaking cool?
This is nuts. And so what I kind of started thinking of is Svelte is just another iteration of a Vue or a jQuery, just kind of a library with tools. You use it, you run. But actually, it's more of a framework on its own. Basically, it gives you all this extra stuff if you choose. And then all these quality of life things that almost feel more like in Svelte and SvelteKit, it's much closer than Vue and Nuxt are, for example.
Exactly. So it gives you all of those things out of the box. And then if you don't need them, they compile away. But you have access to them. And you have access to good defaults that the maintainer team is making sure are up to the standards of SvelteKit before they implement it too. So
exactly. But it seems like it's going fast. Lots of stuff is happening, right?
There are lots of changes happening and lots of things are like being implemented into it, but they're doing an amazing job. I mean, Rich and Simon both working at Vercel on it full time has really helped speed up. I mean, being paid to actually work on the framework is really...
It's crazy good. I love that.
Really great. And yeah, so it has been a good change to have actually dedicated people being paid to work on the framework and allowing these things to be implemented.
Yeah. I have one more question.
Absolutely.
So, when I add, let's say, some sort of client stuff to one of those routes, can
Okay.
it be only lazy hydrating one part of my page, so it's a tiny bundle, or do I
Like,
always have a bundle per route?
are you talking about islands architecture?
Potentially, or something, whatever you want to call it.
So there's no partial hydration built into SvelteKit
Okay.
at this time. That has been discussed and talked about it, but they do not intend on implementing it right now.
Well, I'm not even sure if it's the way to go, because I've recently seen that in Astro, for example, where
I have
it's
heard Rich say that like it's just not something that they're interested in adding to it right now, that it doesn't make sense for the way it's built.
no, and I'm also thinking if you have a HTTP2 with hyperplexing, I think it's called, with like you can load lots of files and it's still relatively fast.
Yeah.
And so like I've seen it with Astro. I'm learning it a bit more to see what these islands do. And it still loads quite a bit of kitchen sink JavaScript to actually make an island on its own work. And then its own code still comes in. And that might use React. So it's still
There was
quite
a
a big bundle
benchmark.
for the little island, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, Astro is kind of blowing my mind with how many things that you can do in it. But there was a benchmark recently where, I mean, sometimes that island's architecture, it needs to be architected right on your end. So you
Yep,
as the
always.
person building the application, SvelteKit does the opposite approach where it gives you good defaults to help you do the right thing by default first. Astro is more of like a build your own thing approach. So you have to like
Yeah.
structure your code in the right way to actually make your framework more performant. But SvelteKit does it in a way that tries to help you out of the box.
I'm more intrigued than I've ever been. So I just need to spend some time. So I'm always looking to renew my personal site because I learn new things while I do that. So you've seen one time that I did that when I worked on when I was learning React, basically.
Yes.
Maybe for 2023, it should be SvelteKit then. But I might have lots of questions. So to finish this up, what's the best place to go if I have these questions?
So these questions, I mean, our docs are amazing. So go to kit.svelte.dev to look at the docs. Our Discord is where you're going to want to go to ask questions. It is svelte.dev/chat to join the Discord. And we have a Svelte Sirens channel, which is the group that I run for women non-binary people. And then there's a community chat. And then there's a help forums channel in Discord that you can select your SvelteKit ecosystem questions, and we get you help as fast as possible in the little forum setting. There's active community members on Twitter, Reddit, all the other platforms available. So if you tag Rich too, I hear that he's pretty fast. If you saw Adam Rackus, he said that he texted Rich on a train about a bug and he had fixed it in like 10 minutes.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting
in the place where that is possible. I'm really excited about this. Thank you for opening all this up. And we just, at the end of the show, our buddy Seth is joining us.
Hey.
So nice to see you, Seth, but we're kind of wrapping up here. But still, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining.
And I know we're a little early. Generally, we are about an hour later. So
I have had a crazy busy schedule, and we tried to do this a couple weeks ago, and we had to reschedule once. I got back from JamStackConf, and
JamStackConf it was busy for everybody. It's normal. You even work there, so imagine that. So I really want to thank you for watching, and if anybody is interested in all that stuff that I said about Uniform, you can actually join us on Discord. So you can go here and do that. But where can people find you, Brittney?
Me, I am at Brittney Postma. So the spelling below you, pretty much everywhere. So GitHub, Twitter, and this is available on GitHub too. Everything that I showed today is at SvelteKit examples on my GitHub at Brittney Postma. So you can find me anywhere with that.
Great. Thank you so much. And it seems like my internet is hanging for just a moment, but that's because we're finishing up. So it's perfect. Thank you so much. It was a great time, and I'm going to be starting my new SvelteKit project tonight, I think.
I'm excited. So let me know if you have questions.
Oh, I will. Don't worry. Anyways, cheers, everybody. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.